Hey guys, Paradoxio here. Welcome back to a brand new video, everybody. Today we are going to be diving into SQLite3 with Python. Now, in case you don't know what SQLite3 is, it is basically a built-in Python library that essentially allows us to give some functionality to our databases and allows us to do things such as appending to the database file, taking from it, editing data in it, and even creating new databases and tables as well. That is what we're going to be getting into in today's video, and we're also going to take a look on how databases work and what we can use them for, and the kind of projects we can make with them and such. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started by making our workspace folder, which I've already done, and then starting off by making a new Python file, which we'll just call main.py. After that, we need to make a database file, which we can just do within Visual Studio's code by right-clicking and clicking new file again, and then we can just call it my data, and then ending it with .db. .db is the file extension for a local database file. Now, if you know a little bit about databases, something that I should probably make very clear in the beginning of this video is this is not MySQL or Postgre. We are not connecting to a server database. Everything we are going to be doing in this video is purely local and will be housed on our own disk. So if you would like to see more videos about MySQL in the future, feel free to let me know because I will definitely make a video on that, or at least something somewhat related to MySQL or Postgre in the future. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and import SQLite. And I'm also going to go ahead and increase the font size. That way you guys can see my code a little bit better. So we have imported SQLite3. So after that, what do we need to do? Well, we need to actually connect our database file. We can do that by typing in db for database, and then we can set it equal to SQLite3.connect. And in here, we need to paste in the file path to our local database file, which in my case, it's in the same directory as my main.py file, so I can just type in mydata.db. Of course, if it is anywhere else, you will need to paste in the full file path. But after that, we can go ahead and run it just to make sure there are no issues. And I believe if you haven't created it already, it'll actually just make a database file. So just in case it can't find it, it'll just make one in that directory. But after that, we need to actually go to our browser because we are going to download something called SQLite browser. So we're going to go to sqlitebrowser.org/dl for download. And then we're going to download the database browser for our OS. In my case, I'm using the 64-bit Windows version. And I also already have it installed. And once you do get it installed, you should be seeing something like this upon opening it. We can go ahead and create a new database if we want, but we are going to go ahead and open the one we had just made. Go ahead and locate your database file, and then open once you find it. Whenever you find your database file and open it, you will see something just like this, which obviously isn't much, as we have not done anything to our database file just yet. As you can see, we have no tables, no indices, nothing at all. If we go to browse data, it'll just be a blank page. Something really cool about SQLite database browser is we can actually execute SQL code within its built-in IDE, and it'll have the results printed to the console if any. But we are going to be mainly executing SQL code within our Python program, so we won't be worrying about this at all today. For now, let's go ahead and close out our database browser and head back to VSC. And then we're going to go ahead and create a table. To do that, all we need to do is type in db.execute create, or I'm sorry, we actually need to do a docstring first. And then create table in all capitals, and then our table's name. Now, for this example, I'm just going to call my table person. After that, we need to go ahead and add a set of parentheses, and then just format this so it looks a little bit easier to read. And then what we are going to do is we are going to go ahead and type in the name of our fields within our table. So we could do first name, and then we can just make this a text type. Do the same with last name. And then if we want an ID, we can do that as an integer. Now, something pretty important to note about the integer data type in SQL is that it can have both whole numbers and floating point numbers, or decimal numbers, as you may know them as. Whereas in Python, you can't pass a decimal number as an integer, but in SQL you can. So if I were to put a decimal number as person ID, the database will append that and have no issue with it. After we have typed in our SQL code within this docstring, what we need to do now is we need to actually save it to our database file, and we can do that by typing in db.commit. And then after that, we need to do db.close. Basically, the .commit method will essentially just save that new data to our database, and close, well, we'll close the database. The reason why we have db.close at the end is because whenever you open a database and you add data and commit to it, that database stays open, and you will not be able to write any more data to that database until that operation has ended and closed. This can cause some significant issues in the performance of your application that you may be developing that is using a database. So once you are done with a certain operation, be sure to close that database, because you can always just open it back up again later whenever you make your DB variable. So let's go ahead and run this. And as you can see, we have no issues at the moment. But if we try to run it again, we're going to get an error, and that's because this table already existed. That basically confirms that our table was created from this executed SQL code that we have here in this docstring. So now that our table is actually created, we can just get rid of this because it is no longer needed. Now, let's say we want to append data to our database, but first let's actually take a look at what our database actually looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and open my database again. Go to browse data, and as you can see, I have 3 columns: first name, last name, and person ID. I want to add a row of data for these columns. So what I will do, and I'm actually going to have this open separately here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up a query that will insert values into a new row. So what we can do now is we can actually just type in db.execute, and we don't need docstring this time. We could just type in insert into, and then we're gonna put in our table's name, which was just person. I believe that's what I named it. Yeah, person. And then we are going to go ahead and type in parentheses, and in here we can just go ahead and pass in the data we want to pass in. So I'm gonna do John, and then Doe, and his ID is just gonna be 123. So keep in mind, we are following the same order as it is set up in our database. So we're putting our first name first, our last name second, and then our ID last. So keep in mind, we are following that same order. It is very important. Oh, and a little mistake I made. We need to have values right here. So towards the end, it should look something like this. And I'm gonna see if I can just... There we go. That looks a bit better. Sweet. Alright, so we need to basically have our query set up like this. Insert into person, the values, and then John Doe 1, 2, 3. And if I go ahead and run this code, see we have no problems. But if we go ahead and go to database structure and then go back to browse data, as you can see, we now have that data appended to our file. Pretty neat, right? We can also add data like this. Filling in placeholders with question marks, and then adding a tuple as a second parameter. And in this tuple, we can just add in our values like so. If I go ahead and run this one more time, as you can see, no error, so that's good news. Go back, browse data, and now we have Jane Doe 456. So that's another way we can insert values into our database. And there's one last way we can do this, and that's just nevstring. Let's say you have a method, and in here you wanted to paste in your, or you wanted to insert your values from the arguments. You can just type them in here like you would any other string. All of that will just get processed as one string later on. So we have learned how to make a new row in our database. Now let's learn how to delete one. So what we can do here is we can type in delete from person where, and then we can select one of these columns, one of these values in the columns, just any of them, it'll delete that one row. Now, for our case, you might not want to use first name or last name because somebody could have the same first name or same last name as someone else. So it's a good idea to pick out unique data to a specific role. And in our case, that would more than likely be person_ID. Another thing I probably should have mentioned earlier is that this is a relational database, meaning all of these values in row 1, they all relate to each other. So if I wanted to delete a row and I would give the value 456 for person ID, it would delete Jane for first name and Doe for last name because they are all related to each other. So that is something important to keep in mind. That's how we can do this. So what we can do is we can go ahead and type in person_ID equals, and then we can just type in 456. And so now basically what this query is saying is delete from person where the person ID is equal to 456. And basically that's going to instruct the database to delete this entire row where the person ID is 456. So let's go ahead and run it. And now we have deleted our row. And if I go back and refresh, as you can see, Jane Doe is no longer in our database. Pretty neat, right? All right, guys. Let's say I want to update a person ID for John James. How would we be able to update this specific value for this specific row in our database? Well, that's pretty simple. All we need to do is just type in db.execute update, and then the table name, which is person, and then we need to set. and then type in our set clause, which is going to be person ID. It's equal to, and then whatever we want to set it equal to. Let's just set it equal to 9999999. And then what we're going to do is we're going to specify where that value is going to be set at. And we're going to type in where person ID is equal to this number I'm going to paste right here. Now you're probably wondering, why am I writing it out like this? Well, basically, what this is saying is if I can maybe, there we go, and shorten this a bit. Sweet, looks a lot better. Basically what this query here is saying is it's going to update my table, which is person, which you can see right here, and it's going to set the person ID to 99999, where the person ID is already set to this number here, which is this one here. So basically it's going to tell SQL to rewrite this number here to 9999. So if I go ahead and run this, as you can see, no errors into our console, which is good. It's good news. If I go back, as you can see, our person ID is changed. We can also change the first and last name. So let's go ahead and remove this, and let's make John James into John Dixon. John Dixon. Perfect name, right? Alright, so let's go ahead and type in update person set first underscore name. And actually, instead of John Dixon, let's do Jim Dixon. And then we're going to do comma, last name is equal to Jim Dixon. There we go. Now we need to specify where we're going to make this change, and we can just do the same thing as earlier, where person ID is equal to, and I'm going to copy and paste this number in here. So let's go ahead and look what we're doing. So we're updating our table, which is person, and we're setting the first name to Jim and the last name to Dixon, where the person ID is 999. So it's basically going to change John James to Jim Dixon, where the person ID is 999, which is obviously here. So let's go ahead and run it and test that out. No errors, perfect. Let's refresh it, and as you can see, it is now Jim Dixon. Now, let's say we want to specify more than one where clause. Well, that's pretty simple. All we have to do is use the AND keyword, and I'll show you how we'll use that. Now, why you might have more than one where clause, it could depend on what you're doing. Let's say person ID isn't 100% unique to the user. Well, then you would use another piece of data to narrow down the query even more. So we can type in update, and we're going to update the first name only this time. And we're going to change Jim back to John, just for the heck of it. Where last name is equal to Dixon. Now, keep in mind, in our case, this is enough. We don't have to have a second where clause, but I'm just showing you for an example. So after that, then we're going to type in and person ID is going to be equal to this mirage of numbers here. So basically, let's say person ID was this number for two different people. Well, if I didn't have this last name clause here, it would just update both of those rows, and we don't want that. So if person ID isn't 100% unique to a specific person, then it's going to update all the rows as first name to John, where their person ID is this. So in that case, it's a good idea to use a second piece of data to narrow down the query even more, like I said just a bit ago. So basically, we're instructing SQL to update the person table and set first name to John, wherever last name is equal to Dixon and person ID is equal to 999. So let's go ahead and try this here. Let's run it. And we should see Jim turn back into John. And it did. So that worked perfectly. So that is basically it for the bare basics of adding data and taking data from our SQL or our database file using Python SQLite3. There will be a part 2 to this, and it's going to have more in-depth details on what we can do with our database files, and I'm going to have a exercise planned out for us to do in that video as well. With the knowledge that you guys have from this video, you could theoretically go ahead and make your Discord bot leveling system using a database. So yeah, without that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I apologize for the late uploads lately. I've been sick, and I also apologize if the quality of my videos aren't that good, or if my voice just sounds really bad. I've been having a pretty rough cold recently, so please disregard any weird sounds that my voice might make. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed database content and would like to see more, be sure to let me know in the comments. Be sure to also join my Discord server. We are at 700 members, and pay a visit to my website and create your account for free today. Be sure to save your email and password associated with your account in a text file or write it down, as I don't have cookies on my website just yet, but I will in the future. So be sure to have all of that saved. Subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.